My fiancée told me I deserved better and broke up with me. I didn't argue. I sold the ring and founded a company. Years later, she was begging to come back after seeing who I had become. My name is Christopher. I'm 30 years old and I work as a project coordinator for a regional construction company called Henderson & Associates. It's not a glamorous job, but it offers stability, an annual salary of $52,000, good benefits, and the possibility of climbing the ladder over time. I had been in a relationship for 5 years with Audrey, whom I met at a 4th of July barbecue when I was 25 and she was 23. We were never that couple that posts everything on social media, but what we had was real. We shared a Netflix password, took turns cooking, and spent Sundays planning what our dream home would look like, a sincere and well-balanced relationship. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit organization. Her job wasn't flashy either, but she was passionate about it, and together we made a good team. I handled the practical side, budgets, payments, planning. She added the touch of creativity and spontaneity. We had a dynamic where I made the dinner reservations and she organized weekend getaways to unfamiliar towns. We had been engaged for 8 months, and the wedding was scheduled for June 15th, 4 months away. But everything fell apart prematurely. Her mother, Susan, gradually began to take control. Our original idea was something simple, an intimate ceremony at the community center, but she transformed it into an event straight out of a wedding design magazine. Everything required almost military precision, from the vendors to the table linens. And without knowing how, I ended up becoming the unofficial event coordinator while maintaining my full-time job. The ceremony venue changed 3 times. The community center wasn't elegant enough. The country club was too pretentious. Finally, they chose a historic mansion that cost 3 times what we had planned. The flowers went from simple bouquets to arrangements fit for a museum gala. The photographer, who was originally going to be one of Audrey's friends who charged $800, was replaced by an award-winning professional who demanded $3,500. Of course, you think, this only happens once, right? We had both been contributing $450 monthly to a joint wedding account for almost 2 years. With contributions from our families, we raised about $30,000. My parents contributed $3,000, hers $5,000, and some aunts and uncles chipped in smaller amounts. For my part, besides that, I was aggressively saving for a down payment on a house, as the apartment rent was costing us $150 a month for a tiny 2-bedroom space. I already had $20,000 set aside for that purpose, and that's not even counting the engagement ring, a custom-designed piece that cost me $12,000, way beyond my means. But Audrey had very clear ideas. White gold, princess-cut diamond with specific purity and color characteristics. She showed me entire boards on Pinterest. I worked overtime for 6 months and even took $3,000 from my retirement fund to fulfill her dream. Everything seemed ready. We had paid a $2,000 deposit for the venue, closed the contract with the catering company after several menu tastings, and designed and sent invitations to 150 people. I was stressed about the logistics, constantly updating my spreadsheet with dates and vendors, but that's part of organizing a wedding, isn't it? The signs were there. I just didn't know how to see them. Audrey started staying longer at the office. She arrived home late, exhausted, distant. She said her organization was going through a transition phase and needed her extra attention. Our conversations became superficial, focused on payments and guest lists. She always avoided talking about the honeymoon or where we wanted to live long term. And then, one Tuesday night in March, everything shattered. We were on the sofa eating leftover Chinese food from the Golden Dragon. One of those home renovation shows was on TV in the background. I was making jokes about the absurd decor choices the homeowners were making. She, however, was very quiet, more than usual, pushing the chicken around with her fork without really eating. I wasn't immediately alarmed. Sometimes she had days like that, more introspective. But something felt different. There was a tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Suddenly, she lowered the TV volume, just as the presenter was talking about load-bearing walls. She turned to me, and her face made my stomach drop. "I can't continue with this," she whispered, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. Still mentally focused on the tile disaster shown on screen, I cracked a joke about how badly the navy blue combined with the lime green, but she shook her head, tears already welling up. "I don't mean the show, Christopher. I mean all of this. The wedding. Us. I'm not ready for this level of commitment." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at her, unable to process what she had just said, that she wasn't ready. We had been together for 5 years. The wedding was 4 months away. The invitations had already been sent. Her cousin had booked a flight from Seattle. "What do you mean you're not ready?" I asked, placing my chopsticks on the table with trembling hands. And then came the speech. One she had undoubtedly rehearsed many times. She said she needed to find herself, that she felt trapped by the idea of marriage, that she feared losing her identity if we got married, that she wanted to travel, discover who she was without strings attached, explore life before fully committing. That phrase, "settling down," was what hurt me the most because it implied that marrying me wasn't building something together, but settling for something less than what she truly desired. She spoke of the weight of social and family expectations, how that made her question whether she really wanted to get married or was only doing it because it was what was expected. She said she felt like she had been sleepwalking through life and needed to wake up and discover her authentic self. I asked her if there was someone else. There was a long pause. Finally, she assured me no, that this was all hers, a personal decision, that it wasn't about anyone else but her individual growth. All the classic breakup phrases, accompanied by tears and apparent sincerity. But there is something important that defines my character. I have never been one to raise my voice. I'm not one to yell, throw things, or slam doors. I grew up watching my father explode over everything, from a traffic jam to reheated food. I swore I would never react the same way. When something big hits me, my mind doesn't get dragged down by emotion. Instead, it activates in practical mode, searching for solutions. So when Audrey confessed that she wanted to call off the wedding, I simply looked at her and replied calmly, "It's okay, I understand." I said it in a calm, firm tone, something she clearly hadn't expected. She fell silent, looking at me as if she didn't know what language I was speaking. "That's it? You're not going to fight for us?" she asked. I suspect she thought I was going to beg her, that I would get down on my knees pleading for another chance, proposing to postpone the wedding or go to couples therapy, but I didn't. I accepted her decision because I learned something watching the disaster of my parents' marriage. You can't convince someone to love you. I told her, if this is not what you want, insisting would be selfish. I want to marry someone who is happy to take that step, not someone who feels trapped. She broke down crying again, but now in a different way, as if she finally understood there was no turning back. The next 3 weeks were brutally exhausting emotionally and mentally. Canceling the vendors was almost another full-time job while I kept up with mine. I tried to recover deposits, called family members to tell them the wedding was off, and repeated the same story to everyone. Most vendors, per contract, retained the advance payments. I lost about $8,000 instantly, with no possibility of a refund. And the worst didn't come from Audrey, but from her family, especially her mother, Susan, who constantly dropped passive-aggressive comments, insinuating that I had pressured her daughter, that I didn't let her grow as a person, that all this was a consequence of my supposedly controlling attitude. According to her, I was the one who rushed the commitment. The story that spread among friends was different, that Audrey needed time to find herself and that I was an obstacle. Many took her side, repeating her version. It's funny how people change the narrative so they don't have to face that sometimes a relationship simply comes to an end. My coworkers showed empathy, although they kept asking if I thought we would reconcile, if this was a simple case of pre-wedding jitters. I had to repeat to them that it wasn't about postponing anything, but that she wanted to end it definitively. A couple of weeks after the breakup, Audrey texted me. She wanted us to meet up to sort out the financial matters, the joint account, the wedding expenses, all of that. We agreed to meet at a downtown coffee shop, a neutral place neither of us frequented. It was called Grain. When she arrived, she didn't look the same. Clothes with loose fabrics, earth tones, stone necklaces, as if she had just walked out of a bohemian-style store. She had changed her style completely. She ordered an elaborate drink with oat milk, several syrups, and who knows what else. I just ordered black coffee. I hadn't had an appetite for weeks and didn't have the mental capacity for complicated menus. The joint checking account was simple. We had about $3,000 earmarked for basic expenses. We divided it equally using the bank app. $1,500 for each of us. Then she took out a small notebook with meticulous calculations made in her precise handwriting. My share of the wedding fund is $1,400, she said. I checked the account balance. We had $29,000 left after canceling vendors and losing the deposits. Her calculation was correct. Without arguing, I transferred her share. Watching almost half of that fund disappear with a single click was hard to swallow, but I didn't say anything. Then what I didn't know how to handle happened. She slid the engagement ring across the table. The afternoon sun illuminated it from the window, making it sparkle. For an instant, I remembered the day I picked it up, the excitement I felt imagining myself giving it to her, how perfectly it fit her. You should keep it, she said without meeting my eyes, focused on her drink. It's custom made and everything. I put it away without saying much. Thank you. That was all that came out of my mouth. There were no emotional speeches, no dramatic declarations, no movie-like farewell. Just two people dividing the remnants of a relationship as if separating what's left after a move. But as I drove back in my old Civic, something bothered me. Her new style, the notebook with calculations, the rehearsed way of talking about her new path. It wasn't an impulsive decision. She had been planning it for months. It was clear that her personal awakening had not been spontaneous. That night in my apartment, the silence became uncomfortable. She had already taken almost all her things. Books, cushions, kitchen utensils, framed photos. What remained looked like a hotel room, clean but soulless. In my hands, I held the ring that cost $12,000. I wondered what to do with it. The rental contract was still valid until August, and although I could pay it alone, I would have to cut all non-essential expenses. Most of the furniture was mine, but the details that made the place a home had been hers. Around 8 p.m., my friend Ryan showed up with some pizzas and energy drinks. We've known each other since sophomore year of high school. He works in electrical installations, mostly residential, although he has also done some commercial projects. He's brilliant at problem solving, and instead of going to college, he chose to learn a trade and start earning money immediately. For years, we had dreamed of opening our own construction company, him in charge of the electrical side and me managing the administration and general coordination. It was always someday. Someday when we have enough money, when the time is right. One of those dreams that stay eternally on pause. I was in the kitchen when my friend Ryan saw the ring on the countertop and let out a low whistle. Wow, are you going to return it? I already called the jeweler, I replied. Custom pieces have no resale value. With luck, I'll get $6 or $7 grand. And that's at a pawn shop. Ryan was silent for a moment, observing the ring thoughtfully. Then I noticed a different expression on his face, a mix of concentration and excitement. Christopher, listen to me, he said with sudden energy. What if this is a sign from the universe? A sign of what? That I'm terrible at choosing partners and should stay single the rest of my life? No. Think about this. We've been talking about starting our own company, R&C Contracting, for 3 years. Now you have $1,400 from the wedding fund, whatever you get for the ring, plus what you saved for the house. That's real startup capital. I burst out laughing. That is literally all the money I have in the world. What if we fail? What if in 6 months we're broke, unemployed, and out of options? And what if we don't fail? What if this is the start of something big? And then it hit me like a lightning bolt. I was 30 years old, single for the first time in 5 years, no mortgage, no kids, no obligations tying me down. If I was ever going to risk everything for myself, It was now. In 5 years, I could be married, with children, with responsibilities. That window closes fast. How much do we need to do it right? I asked. Ryan's eyes lit up, noticing I was serious. A truck, tools, insurance, licenses, operating expenses for 6 months, about $35,000 to $40,000 to get a solid start. The next morning, I called 4 jewelers and 3 pawn shops. The best offer for the ring was $6,800 from a specialty jeweler. It hurt to sell it for so little, but keeping it in a drawer wouldn't pay the bills. So I added $1,400 from the wedding fund, $6,800 from the ring, and $20,000 I had saved for the house. Total, $41,300. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough if we used it wisely. For the next month, Ryan and I dedicated ourselves to planning everything in detail. We registered the company for $200. We obtained the state contractor's license for $350 plus exam fees. We bought a used Ford F-150 for $18,000 with 95,000 miles. Basic tools from Lowe's and Home Depot. Drills, saws, levels, multimeters, hand tools. Nothing fancy, but quality. Our strategy was simple. Start with small residential jobs, build a reputation through recommendations, and once consolidated, aim for commercial contracts. I cut expenses. I left my 2-bedroom apartment and moved into a studio for $950 a month instead of paying $1,850. Every cent had to go to the business. Ryan quit his job at Brennan Electric after 8 years, and in July we officially launched R&C Contracting. I submitted my resignation at Henderson and Associates. My boss tried to keep me with a pay raise and a promise of a promotion, but I had already made the decision. I didn't want to burn bridges, so I trained my replacement and left on good terms. The first 6 months were incredibly tough. 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Bathroom renovations for $1,200 that took 3 days. Electrical upgrades in dusty attics. Deck installation in unbearable heat. I handled customer service, permits, scheduling, invoicing, and accounting. Ryan took on the electrical side, and both of us did the heavy lifting, demolition, painting, cleanup. The money barely stretched. Sometimes we didn't know if we could afford the materials for the next job. We ate instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. We worked from my small studio. I turned the dining area into an office with a folding table and 2 cheap chairs from Walmart. Our first client came through a referral from a former coworker of Ryan's. An older couple needed to update the electrical wiring in their kitchen. 2 days of work, $800. They were so satisfied that they recommended us to a neighbor who needed the same in her bathroom. Like that, little by little, it started working. We finished jobs on time and without cost overruns. Clients were happy with our quality and our way of communicating. The word began to spread in the community. By the 8th month, we had a waiting list. The key was treating every project as if it were the most important, showing up on time, leaving everything clean, and explaining what we were doing. Basic professionalism that apparently many contractors neglect. We closed the first year with enough reputation to hire 2 part-time employees, Tommy, a 22-year-old with electrical knowledge and great responsibility, and Marcus, a retired carpenter who wanted to stay active. That allowed us to take on larger jobs and not get physically exhausted as before. Since that coffee shop where Audrey broke up with me, I hadn't heard from her. I blocked her on my phone and social media, not out of resentment, but because I needed to look forward without distractions. I heard through friends that she had spent months in Europe with an artist she met online, traveling, searching for her essence, reinventing herself. Honestly, I wished her the best. If that was what she needed, I hoped she found what she was looking for. I, on the other hand, was working harder than ever, and every day I felt more motivated. Building something of your own from scratch is addictive. Every new client, every completed project, every month we closed in the black felt like a personal victory. The second year brought growth that surprised both of us. We rented a small 800-square-foot office in a commercial complex. It had a reception area and space for tools. We hired 4 full-time employees, including Sarah, our new administrator. We weren't getting rich, but we were profitable. Ryan and I were earning around $48,000 a year, less than our previous jobs, but with unlimited growth potential. The work was difficult, yes, but also gratifying in ways the corporate environment never was. We were building something real, useful, that had an impact on our community. And then came the newspaper article. One Wednesday morning, almost exactly 2 years after Audrey ended our engagement, I was reviewing proposals for a new commercial project when my phone started vibrating nonstop, saturated with messages and calls. A message from my sister, Jennifer, said, "Christopher, my God, you made the business section." Another from my mom, "So proud of you." I saw the article. 3 different clients texted me, congratulating me on the newspaper feature. Ryan walked into my office with a massive grin, holding a copy of the local paper folded right to the business section. Taking up a quarter of the page was an article titled "Local Success Stories, Small Businesses, Big Achievements," with a photo of Ryan and me standing in front of our office, both wearing polo shirts with the RNC Contractors logo. The article detailed how RNC went from being just 2 guys with a truck and an idea to a company with 10 employees in just 2 years. They interviewed several clients, all praising our reliability and the quality of our work. They also mentioned that we started with personal savings after I redirected my resources following a canceled wedding, a classy way of saying my life fell apart and I built something new from the rubble. It was a fantastic article, one of those that makes you sound like the living embodiment of the entrepreneurial dream. And honestly, that's what I felt it reflected well. It wasn't a mass circulation newspaper, maybe about 15,000 copies. But seeing our work recognized on paper felt incredible. The journalist had interviewed me for an hour. We talked about our growth strategy, the obstacles we overcame, and my advice for other entrepreneurs. Seeing all that printed in black and white gave the journey a whole new dimension. While I was showing the article to Marcus, our part-time carpenter, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "I saw the article. You look incredible." I felt my stomach sink. I recognized that writing style, those specific words. I didn't reply. A few hours later, another message arrived. "I've been thinking about us lately, about everything that happened." I didn't answer that one either. I showed the messages to Ryan, who just shook his head. "Block that number, man. Nothing good comes from going backward." But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to leave the number unblocked. And then this morning I received the message that finally motivated me to tell this whole story. I woke up to what was undoubtedly a text divided into several parts. It clearly exceeded the character limit. The gist of it said she had made a huge mistake, that her mother had negatively influenced her about the commitment, that the artist she dated after me was a freeloader who only used her money for failed projects. Big surprise, right? She was now working at Target. She had moved back in with her parents and, after a period of reflection, had come to a conclusion. She wanted to be with me. But there was one line in particular that made me burst out laughing. It said, "I see who you've become, Christopher. I want to be part of what you're building." She didn't miss me, or realize she loved me, or that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She wanted to be part of what I'm building, as if she saw a successful company and wanted to jump on the boat, like a vulture circling something profitable. I screenshotted the messages and sent them to Ryan with the note. "You're not going to believe this." His response was immediate. "Don't you dare." Seriously, I didn't reply to Audrey, nor do I plan to. But something told me that wouldn't be all, and I wasn't wrong. A week after ignoring her messages, the real offensive began, almost with military precision. The first attack didn't come directly to me, but through Ryan. An email arrived in our business account. Sender, Susan, Audrey's mother. Subject, a mother's concern. Ryan forwarded it to me with a simple, "Dude, you have to read this masterpiece of manipulation." The email was a gem of audacity. It presented Audrey as a victim broken by social pressure who had felt she had to sacrifice her identity for marriage. It praised Ryan for being such a loyal friend during my difficult times. Then it insinuated that Audrey had been an essential emotional support during the years I was developing my business vision, and that perhaps her initial contribution should be valued and recognized. Everything was written in a reasonable and affectionate tone that barely concealed the implicit threat. The message was clear. Audrey believed she deserved a share of what we had built, simply for having been present when we dreamed about it. We didn't reply. Then she started showing up everywhere. I wouldn't call it stalking, but there were too many coincidences to be accidental. Ryan and I would have lunch at our usual spot, and 20 minutes later she'd be there buying coffee. We'd go to Home Depot for materials, and there she was, casually shopping for her mother. We went to the bank to make a deposit, and we found her using the ATM right outside. Each time she greeted us with a smile, as if we were old acquaintances crossing paths purely by chance. Cordial, but not invasive, just present. The direct confrontation came at a monthly Chamber of Commerce meeting we attended for networking. These events are usually somewhat monotonous but useful for finding new clients and strengthening relationships with other local business owners. I was talking to the owner of a property management company about potential maintenance contracts when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Audrey. She looked nervous, but determined. She was wearing a discreet business outfit, a complete departure from the bohemian style she had adopted after our breakup. "Christopher, please, can we talk for 5 minutes?" Ryan immediately appeared by my side, almost like a personal bodyguard, ready to intervene if necessary. The company owner politely excused himself and walked away, likely sensing that drama was coming. 5 minutes, I replied, and we stepped out to the parking lot. As soon as we were alone, the tears started. "Everything I texted you is true, Christopher. I was foolish. I ruined the best thing I had because I was confused and scared." I remained silent, not expressing any emotion. My face stayed completely neutral while she spoke between sobs. "I want us to try again," she said, her voice cracking. "Look at everything you've achieved. R&C is impressive. I always knew you had that potential, that determination. I want to be your partner in everything again." There it was. The truth finally spoken. She didn't miss me. What she missed was the direction my life was heading. She saw the success from the outside and wanted to jump on the train that had already left the station. "Audrey," I replied in a serene tone, "you gave up on being in my life the day you decided you needed to find yourself. You wanted independence, and I respected that decision. Now it's your turn to respect mine." At that instant, her attitude changed completely. The tears stopped suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The mask of vulnerability vanished, and something colder emerged in its place. "I helped make this possible, Christopher. That money was for our wedding. We saved it together for our future." I couldn't help but laugh. That money was in a shared account, legally divided, based on what each person contributed. "I used my share to build something. You chose to spend yours traveling around Europe with your artist boyfriend. That was your choice, and mine," she added angrily. Her voice rose. The anger was beginning to surface. "You're punishing me for a single mistake, for being honest with my feelings." "It's not punishment," I replied calmly. "It's protection. For me, for Ryan, and for our employees. I can't allow someone who only wants back in because there is something valuable here to get involved again." Without another word, I walked back inside the building, leaving her alone in the parking lot. That same night, Ryan and I concluded that this wasn't over. The sense of entitlement was too strong, and Susan, her mother, was clearly pulling the strings behind everything. Monday morning, my first call was to a lawyer. I hired David Chen, who specialized in legal protection for small businesses with excellent references. During our initial meeting, after I told him everything, he assured me we were in a solid position. "She has no legal right to your company or your assets," he told me from his perfectly organized desk. "You used legally obtained funds from a joint account that was properly divided. The breakup is documented, the division was mutual, and you built the business afterward. But something concerns me. People with that level of ego don't always limit themselves to legal action." And he wasn't wrong. The next attack was directed squarely at our company and executed with alarming sophistication. On Thursday morning, Sarah, our receptionist, received a call from someone who introduced herself as Patricia Williams, a supposed executive from Regional Development Associates, a large local development firm. She claimed to be interested in hiring us for several projects worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and mentioned she learned about us from the recent newspaper article. Sarah passed the call to Ryan, who usually handles new clients. The woman sounded professional, asking intelligent questions about our experience in commercial projects, our operational capacity, and availability. She even requested references from current clients to complete the validation process. Ryan, thinking he was about to land the most important contract in our history, provided the details of two key clients, a property management company and a local restaurant chain. We didn't realize it was a trap until a week later. Tom Richardson of Richardson Property Management called me, concerned. "Christopher, I received a very disturbing anonymous email about you and your company. I think you should see this as soon as possible." He forwarded it directly. Reading it, a chill went down my spine. The email insinuated that I had unethically used funds from my ex-fiancée to start the company. It painted me as a manipulator who took advantage of Audrey's emotional state after the breakup to appropriate the money. It claimed I pressured her to accept an unfair division, while she was not in a clear state of mind. There were enough true details: the date of the breakup, the amount of the wedding fund, the moment I founded the company, for anyone who didn't know the whole story to believe the lies. They sent that poisoned message to our two main clients. This was no longer just a personal attack. They wanted to destroy our reputation, cut off Ryan's income, jeopardize jobs, and dismantle relationships we had spent 2 years building. I called David immediately and read him the entire content of the email. When I finished, he said, "They just handed us the victory. This is a clear case of defamation and business sabotage. We are going to legally crush them." In less than 48 hours, David sent warning letters to Audrey and Susan via certified mail. They detailed the pattern of harassment, the fraudulent call to obtain client information, and the slanderous emails. It was made clear that any further attempt at contact or interference would result in immediate legal action. Additionally, I personally called both clients, explained that I was a victim of a harassment campaign by a destabilized ex-fiancé, and provided them with complete documentation, a timeline of the breakup, records of the transfers, everything. Fortunately, our relationships were solid enough for them to understand what was happening. But the damage was done. Trust had been compromised, and I had to spend valuable time mitigating a crisis I should never have had to face. The legal letters didn't stop them. They just made them act more cautiously. 3 weeks later, a process server handed me a lawsuit. Audrey had decided to take me to court to demand the return of her portion of the wedding fund, $1,400 plus interest and compensation for emotional distress and unjust enrichment. In the lawsuit, she alleged that after the breakup, I emotionally pressured her into accepting an unfair financial settlement, taking advantage of her fragility. Audrey accused me of exploiting her emotional state to keep money that, according to her, should have been divided differently. David, my lawyer, could barely contain his enthusiasm when reading the complaint. "They just signed their own death warrant," he said with a huge smile. "We are going to get this dismissed with prejudice, and they will pay every last cent of our legal fees." The legal process was slow and expensive, as always, but we had what truly matters: the truth, solid documentation, and competent representation. David's strategy was clear and effective. Document everything, act professionally, and allow the other party's lies to fall apart on their own. We gathered bank evidence demonstrating the existence of a joint account with the deposit history and the $1,400 transfer that was made to Audrey's personal account. We also obtained phone records that evidenced a false call related to a commercial inquiry, as well as screenshots of Audrey's recent messages attempting to resume contact with me. We even kept emails from her mother, Susan. The breaking point came during Audrey's deposition 6 months later. David confronted her with all the documentation: bank statements, call records, message history. He dismantled her version with surgical precision. "Ms. Audrey," he began, "you voluntarily received $14,500 in your personal account on March 18th. Is that correct?" "Yes, but I was emotionally unstable." "And you used that money to travel around Europe for 3 months. Starting just 10 days after receiving it?" he added, leaving no room for evasion. She had no choice but to admit it. Color drained from her face as David continued by showing her a calendar of events, flight reservations to Paris, lodging, and social media posts taken before we even had our meeting to divide the accounts. The flight reservations were dated March 15th, 3 days before she and I met to discuss the money division. It was evident the trip had already been planned beforehand. Then came the definitive proof. Phone records showed that Susan had called our office from her personal number, posing as an interested client. When confronted with the recording, all our calls are recorded for training purposes, Audrey's story completely collapsed. Her lawyer immediately understood they had no chance. A week later, they filed their request to withdraw the lawsuit to avoid an even more humiliating and costly defeat. But we weren't going to let them off that easily. David immediately requested sanctions, demanding that they pay all of our legal expenses due to the unfounded and malicious nature of their claim. The judge, after reviewing the evidence of defamation and fraud, ruled in our favor without hesitation. The result was that Audrey and Susan were ordered to pay over $19,000 in legal fees. Ironically, the same amount Audrey tried to appropriate ended up becoming a debt she now owes my lawyer, with interest included. However, the real reward was not financial, but seeing how the consequences spread throughout the local business community. The news spread quickly. The attempted fraud, the fake calls, the defamatory emails they tried to use to damage my reputation. Audrey and Susan went from respected figures to being completely marginalized. Some acquaintances who had previously been sympathetic to the story of a woman trapped in a difficult relationship radically changed their stance when they learned everything they had tried to do behind my back. As some contacts told me, the financial strain eventually destroyed Audrey's family bond. Susan blamed her for being weak and dragging her into a legal dispute they couldn't win. Audrey, for her part, blamed her mother for pressuring her to sue when she only wanted to resolve it privately. They had to take out a second mortgage on Susan's house to pay the judgment. Audrey moved back in with her parents to help with the payments, but the cohabitation became a battlefield filled with reproach and tension. Those two who previously worked together to harm me now hated each other for creating such an economic disaster. Audrey got a job at a department store, but her salary barely covered her share of the debt. Trapped in payment plans that will take her years to clear, she was living with parents who didn't want her around and had a ruined credit history due to the court judgment. Meanwhile, at R&C Contracting, we not only achieved stability, but began to expand aggressively. We closed a key contract for the remodeling of a medical center and doubled our team in less than a year. Ryan and I went from worrying about every invoice to planning the hiring of new supervisors and acquiring more advanced tools. I bought a simple but solid house, with enough space to continue building my life away from the chaos. It wasn't a whim or a status symbol. It was a reflection of what one can achieve when one bets on the right thing and not the easy thing. And although many things changed around me, there is something I decided to keep the same: the firmness of never reopening doors that proved they needed to be closed. An old contact told me that Audrey had tried to communicate with me again. This time there were no messages, no calls, no social media requests, just a casual comment during a meeting of acquaintances. It seems she finally understood what she lost. I didn't respond. I just smiled calmly because I learned that not everything deserves an answer. Sometimes the best closure is not a grand gesture, nor a confrontation, nor even a visible victory. Sometimes the most powerful thing is silence, moving forward, and the peace of knowing you kept going without looking back.